So, we have been working on actually to stay out of trouble during COVID.
Yeah.
That's how this all began. A little closer.
Yeah, perfect.
We go landscape portrait.
Yes, sir. It's got to be portrait.
Perfect. There's your thumbnail.
Yep.
The video thumbnail. We got it.
It's the wrong world building.
Step one of world building. Step two.
Yeah, step one, get up close and personal. Step two, know your audience.
Anybody else worried?
You signed the disclaimer sheet before you came in, huh? We were trying to stay out of trouble, and we've been working on many different projects before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, we needed something to really sink our teeth into, and our Fate of the Nords universe was looking for a city box set. We wanted to bring back something. You guys remember second edition, those classic box sets with maps, books, places to be, people to see and touch and feel. And we wanted something in the Fate of the Nords universe. To give you guys a little bit of a rundown of the setting, it is about 930 AD, and we are in historical Europe. And we had a lot of cities to choose from, possibly. And one of the things that we were kind of contemplating is what would give us the most, I guess, story arcs and warring factions and variety of people and senses and, I guess, backgrounds all melting together in one place during this time period. And that was Dublin. So Athcliath is the name of Dublin in the 10th century. And at that time, it's a very interesting period in history because you've got the Vikings that have come over from Jorvik to Northumbria, across the Channel, and they conquered the Hibernian Isle. The issue is they don't have enough manpower to really occupy it.
Yeah, you can't hold it.
No. And so then the politics come in. How do we get, our little flunkies to do all of our, dirty work across the aisle? And the city is going to be Dublin, where the seat of power is going to be. And while Citric holds the seat of power, you've got a whole bunch of nobles that have to basically support him in keeping the populace in line. The other interesting part in Ireland at that time is we've got Christianity that's already been there for 200 years. So you've got pagan Norse, you've got the Celtic pagans, but you've also got the Christian Celts. So you've got three kind of like religions all melting together in that one spot.
So you have the friction between three faiths. You have the nobles, whom the various rulers, particularly the Norse ones, need for support. So you're beginning to build your stable of moving parts in the world building sense. Now
You need to speak up for him.
there's one other world building thing that in the wider world building sense, have you noticed that there are a much more organic way, if you're using it for role playing, is to pinpoint a location and build outwards from there. So what Athcliath is, you pinpoint the location you want to be the cradle of the beginning of play. Play doesn't have to stay there, but it's a lot easier to world build, because the other way of world building is, it's like the famous multitasking, where you have to keep thinking of everything. And there will be a lot of moments where you go, oh, I forgot, like Athcliath, historically, there was a slave trade. Well, the moment you mention that, if you're going to keep it, you're going to have that as an element. Okay, who buys the slaves? Where do they get them from? Where do they go to? What does that do financially to the area? What rules do the slave traders have? Yeah. So if it's like we're both Canadian, we have a maple sugar cartel up in Canada.
Yes,
okay.
Very real.
Yeah, very real. So when you think about things like that, what rules do they establish? How do they, like watching all these many depictions of the mafiosi, but in America, in various TV shows. How do they self-police? What are the fights they have going on? Okay, so that's like a dynamic thing for your world building. So building outwards from a point is easier, particularly if you've never done it before. Because instead of, oh, I forgot this, oh, I forgot that, as you're building it, things will hit you a lot faster. Like, okay, what's beyond that huge building? Oh, the docks. Oh yeah, we're a river port. You know, the
How the
things,
docks work.
yeah, things will hit you faster, and it's easier to world build that way. It's not easier if you're actually sitting across the gaming table from a bunch of veteran gamers who are going, yeah, what's at the docks? And you go, oh shit. So
Yeah.
you might want to do a little bit of this beforehand, but it is the point outwards is actually easier, and it can be the classic D&D thing. I have bought this dungeon. This dungeon is in a village or town. What's around a village or town? What kingdom, if it is a kingdom? And if you want to see that, I did that with Evening Star in the Realms. There's the Haunted Halls of Evening Star. Bang! There is your dungeon. The village of Evening Star is just to the south of it, and the Stonelands are to the north of that. And those all go together. Okay, and then we build out for, they're in Cormier. I don't know what Cormier is yet, but we'll find out. So I look it up and find out. So you can do it that way. So back to Athcliath. Now, I was just doing this is one easy way to world build. If you haven't done it before, this is the more logical way, because it's like it builds its own table of contents for you as you're working on things. And you can keep the focus on the adventure you're starting with, because guess what? On Thursday night or Saturday night, they're all going to be showing up. So if you deputize one guy to bring the booze or the whatever, and somebody else to make the chip dip, and somebody else to bring the bags of chips, okay, you guys have got that covered. Now I've got to prepare for the first adventure. You can be in the back of your mind. You go, oh yeah, I have to come up with Cormier. They have soldiers. I'll think about that later. You know, but you can do this as you use the core beginning location.
And that's exactly how we wanted to start Athcliath as well. So when we looked at all of the cities, when we settled on Athcliath, we started bottom up. Okay, so who are the people that we want to start the story around? And this is where we led into Ed's novel, The One-Eyed King. We said, let's start with some people that live in the city, and let's try to figure out what their motivations are. So what kind of story arcs, what is their 9 to 5? And then let's get beyond the mundane. What are the big plots happening in the city? Are people trying to expel the king? Are they trying to assassinate the king? Who would they send to assassinate the king? If they wanted to send someone to assassinate the king, is there someone on the inside on the town that would help them? And so by building writing the novel first, which is what we wanted to do, is Ed wrote The One-Eyed King first, and then we started building out from there. So this is that bottom-up approach. We've got now a whole bunch of a cast that lives in the city. They've had some stories in the city.
And let's underscore that right away. A world is not geography. A world is people.
Exactly.
If you just have a vague, well, let's call it Ravenloft, the Mists. If you just have a vague background, but you have vivid characters in the foreground, that's enough to satisfy at the beginning. So I just wanted to underscore that. A world is people. They don't have to be humans. They can be like beholders, dragons, whatever, the monsters. But it's the people, not the place. The place will come. The people is where you start, because it's the compelling stories that those people will tell for you by bouncing off each other. Again, back to the cabals and the different faiths and the different social classes, the nobles and so on. That's your story roots. That's the kernel and the fuel of your stories.
And those would be our discussions too. And
Yeah.
when we would end up talking, we would be like, okay, so we've added this new character, and this new character, okay, so, if they're part of a cabal, what is the purpose of this cabal? Why is it a cabal and not a company? Why are they trying to stay in the shadows? Why are they trying to avoid the taxes? Oh wait, taxes. How do taxes work? And then, okay, if you're taxing your people, what's the rate? And in our city, it's 100%. And that immediately raises eyebrows. Why the hell is the king taxing at 100%? And that is a whole laundry list of the king's motivations, his pet projects, everything that he wants to do. And that undergirds the city in terms of why he's invited certain merchants, certain aristocrats, certain factions into a city to make those agendas start coming to life. And so now we can start looking at all the little people, all the little cogs in the wheel of how they work together. And now if someone's not paying their taxes, now we start talking, oh, how about the justice system?
Yes.
If you don't pay your taxes,
what happens?
you know,
Yeah.
are they,
What's the inspection?
Yeah.
Inspection, enforcement, and then resolution of enforcement.
exactly.
Yeah, quote justice. But well, yeah. But you see, we've already started. The world is alive just by doing that, and we haven't actually necessarily drawn any maps. People tend to do the wrong thing. They say, "Oh, I need to start with the map
Yeah.
and fill it in."
Oh, give me.
And that will work, and I've done it that way, but I can tell you it will take longer, and there will be more puzzle moments where you're just going, oh, so what would be here? And if you're building the other way, that never happens to you.
And this came much later in the process. Much later in the process. This is the city, and actually right now at this point, every single building you see here has a description of what's inside. The people, the business, what's being sold, every single building. And that's kind of how pedantic we've been.
Yeah, and
During
that,
the pandemic.
that has a Dungeon Master's benefit or a Norn's benefit for Fate of the Norns, in that no longer can your players zag instead of the zig you hope they do, and then they turn suddenly on their heels and say, we're going to that building over there. You have the guards and the lights and the golden treasure, the Ark of the Covenant sitting right there. You obviously want us to go there, so we're going over there. Which players do all the time. Well, if you,
Everyone knows.
yeah, if you detail every single building in the city, it literally doesn't matter. And it also means you're spending your design time on the fly, where you're thinking on your feet or on your butt if you're sitting at the table, where you're just thinking up stuff. It has to do with the story at hand right now, not about the setting, because the setting already has it covered for you. Now, that also is the result of spending 2.5 years of scut work filling in all the stuff. Unless you are just planning on becoming a dungeon master or a Norn for the first time when you're old and white-haired and have grown a long beard, ladies will take longer, so that gains them more time right away. They have advantage. Unless you want to do that, you're always going to be using the world to tell stories, either fictional stories or at the gaming table, before you're finished detailing it. Don't worry.
Yep.
You're going to be detailing it for the rest of your life. What you need is enough to get rolling on. And the things that get rolling on, now, the next step after that first step is, what are the big stories, the plots, the unfolding things? Things like, we know that this country is eventually going to make war on that country. Everybody can feel it's coming.
The tension.
Who is building up arsenals and armories? Who is preparing? Because if you can find out about their preparations, or if rumor, just gossip, has their preparations unfolding, then the stakes are rising because it's coming sooner. So that's that. And then from the big geopolitical stuff, and of course, if you remember the Forgotten Realms, when we started with the Savage Coast, the Savage North, it was like, oh, there are orc hordes. Every few years, whenever they overpopulate their caverns, the young kids are pushed out by the old elders, saying, oh, well, there's like everything south, gold, just do it, and out they go. They boil forth and come. So that's an ongoing problem. So those are the big ones. Then we bring it back to the small ones. And by small, I don't necessarily mean smaller in scope. I mean more individual, looking over the shoulders of your characters. And the small ones come in two sorts. All the stuff we're used to, like sex, greed, all that stuff that generates, I want your money. I took it.
The vices
I
in
want
the
you.
city.
Yeah,
Exactly. The
yeah.
vices in the city.
And what flows out of that, which is family feuds, or you insulted my beautiful younger sister 10 years ago. Our families are now daggers drawn for the rest of existence. There's no way you can repair this except by dying on the point of my sword. So you build in those little feuds. And then the next sort of thing, everybody loves a mystery. There should be things in the setting that are hinted at or talked about that are not solved. And they can be something as simple as the dragon hid its treasure somewhere in that mountain.
Rumors.
Yeah.
A list of rumors,
Yeah.
and not all true.
Yeah, not all true. But so we now have everybody loves a mystery. We have the next level, but based in personal characters. So and so wants this. So and so wants that. So and so no longer wants to be married to the ugly old, continually farting king. When there are these handsome young knights riding right past the window every day, or whatever, and then, or maybe rumors, maybe that isn't really the case, but the court now has rumors that the queen is restless. She's ready for her Lancelot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that sort of thing, because the rumor itself can have that force. So now we're down to the things that will generate stories by giving you more to work with.
And you don't need to figure it all out. And that's the whole beauty of rumors, right? So rumors could be true, they could be false, and you might have an idea of where a story arc can go, but during that process of design, it is not a solitary pursuit. You are not locked up in your room writing for 2.5 years. You're GMs. You're sitting down with your crazy players, and your players are going to help flesh out this entire universe for you. They're going to ask these questions that haven't popped into your head yet. And you're going to be like, oh yeah, what do they cook at that eatery? And where do they get that fish during Ragnarok when everything should be cold and snowy
Yeah.
and frozen over? So is that cannibalism? Like, is that meat coming from somewhere suspect? And so those players are going to help refine all the little rough edges. It's not all on you. You let the players do a lot of that for you. Like some of the classics, like we have another panel tomorrow for GM tips and tricks. And one of them is, you know, a lot of times you can come up with a puzzle that has really no solution, and you let the players invent a really beautiful solution for you.
Because
And-
you guys are geniuses.
Yeah.
And when you get to the solution, you'll know that we're geniuses too.
And so with these world building things, it's going to be the same thing. Your players are going to help fill in those gaps, and they're going to help build that world for you as well. They're going to come up with who that neighbor is that they're going to be, you know, targeting to try and get out of that house because that's where they want to set up their lair in the city. You know, they're going to try to get that poor family evicted because that's that perfect 2-story building that they need to have that overlook over that bank across the street, or, you know, the King's Guard that goes by every single day. And the other thing with, you know, your world building is, especially if you've got like a constrained space like a city, one of the things that, you know, I threw at my players as a monkey wrench is they ended up taking out a city patrol once they had moved into the city, and this was going to be a long-term campaign in Athgoliath. And once they took out the patrol, I had the funeral procession for that patrol go right past their lair the next day, with their orphan children crying for their dads, their widows, and they were just like, you son of a bitch. All of a sudden the city just became a lot more real and personal to them, because they're like, these are not nameless goblins or Star Trek red shirts we killed. They're actual people in this world that had collateral damage that we've caused. And so they were like, okay, we're going to pay for these orphans. We're going to, you know, get them into, you know, a school and, you know, take care of them. And these widows, we're going to make sure they're not kicked out of their homes because there's no longer a city guard that's protecting, you know, these predatory businesses that are trying to, you know, take over their real estate. And so they went from, you know, heroes to villains to back to heroes because of this living and breathing world that you guys create for them. And you twist these paradigms of traditional RPG tropes where kick down the door, roll for initiative, kill the monster, loot, rinse and repeat. And one of the things that we threw into Athgoliath, which was kind of a twist on your typical city, is you won't find sewers in the city because you're right at the water level. So when people dig down into their basements, you're going to dig in the water.
Free swimming pool.
And so all of a sudden, it's like where you've got your typical medieval of like, oh yeah, we'll just go into the sewers and we'll go through the city undetected. All of a sudden the player's like, that option's off the table. Okay, now we're going to think outside the box. So that's what you want to do as well, is turn some of those tropes upside down for your players to keep them really thinking and something fresh comes out of it. It's not something that's like recycled and reused.
And when you're world building, it is easy to get very abstract. Oh, there are 6 noble houses and their names are, and how do I tell them apart? Oh, these ones are snottier than these ones. These ones, genetic trait, they all look like toads. And we're already into the other trick for world building is use the tags that you need in a good role-playing session at the table.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be careful with this. You have to walk the line of being subtle, because as you know, as gamers, we're all subtle. You don't want every house to have a distinctive round door of a particular hue. You don't want every NPC to be physically gorgeous or physically hideous or whatever, because that gets to be lazy and it gets to be a stereotype. But what you're going to need at the table as a dungeon master, as a Norn, is tags. Well, this guy has a huge bulbous red nose, but he doesn't look drunk. There's something else going on, something like that. And so you don't want everything to be overblown caricature, but as you're designing things, you want memory tags for them, which are little visual aids. So you can say, do you remember the lady with the long blonde hair right down to her ankles that lived on this street? Well, you see her, and scurrying along behind her is a goblin. The goblin's in chains, but it seems to enjoy being in chains. I wonder what's going on there. You know, but you see, you're building in visual aids and building in mysteries, building in interesting things. But as you work on the abstract things, I mean, names come easily to me. They might not to somebody else. So if you're creating all those noble families and you can't think up good names for them, yeah, don't worry about it. They can be A, B, C, and D for now. But you're just adding the little tags, and as you go on using them, as you go on playing with them for the unfolding story, things will come to you. Hey, I need them to be doing this. So maybe there's something to do with shipping. Okay, and you just write down shipping for that noble house. And you're building it organically. You're building it for what your needs are right away in that adventure or that scenario. But because you're building it organically for that scenario, it's making sense. It's not just artificially borrowed from somewhere or just made up off the top of your head. And you realize later, wait, why would they do that in this setting? If they're all fisher folk and they all eat fish all the time, and this guy is somehow made like millions from clams?
Yeah.
What? You know, but if you built it to fit it, then it feels real to you. You know how to use it because you have been using it, and then you're just adding detail, and that's way easier. The difference between being told by, say your art teacher tells you, that wall offends me, I want a mural on it, and you look at it and go, okay. Well, it's an awful lot easier if you take a bucket of red paint and throw it at the wall, and instead of looking at a blank wall, you're now looking at a wall with red all over it in different model gradations, and it's dripping and running down, and you run over there with a brush and start doing things with the drips. It's easier to work with something that's always there.
And it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you will make a mistake during creation, especially if you're on the fly. So your players will ask you a question about a certain organization, a business, a cabal, a cartel, and you'll just wing something off the top of your head for that session. And afterwards you realize that just completely screwed up my world. Like I made them too rich, too powerful, not significant enough, something. It's okay to rewind and redo that. It's not written in stone.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you made it happen for one session doesn't mean now it's canon in your universe. You can go back.
But you can make two decisions at that point.
Yep.
Do I just rewrite it? You know, does the hand of the gods change things? Or do I try and come up with some weird in-game explanation? Like, you know that rich, snotty family that lives across the road and hates your guts? And everybody, all the young sons of the family look like Sting when he was doing Dune, and you don't want them there anymore? okay, suddenly somebody else showed up and there was a huge fight and the mansion caught fire in the middle
Got
of
rid
the
of
fight
them.
and burned down and everybody's dead and gone and there's drifting smoke and ashes and well, no more family.
Yep.
You see, but if it works in your uses at the time, your unfolding uses, then come up with something in game for it rather than just the hand of God.
Yeah.
So, and
Or misunderstandings.
Yeah,
Like, oh, you misunderstood
Yes.
the power of this cartel or whatnot.
Yeah.
You thought they were all powerful, but they're
Yeah.
really not. You pull away the wizard's, curtain and, oh, no, he's not the Wizard of
Sure.
Oz. Yeah.
or there's a big mystery and deception going on. You thought all these guys looked like Sting?
Yeah.
Well, they all looked like Sting because the witches who actually run the family cast a spell on everybody as they go out the door who's going to be doing stuff on behalf of the family. So they all look like Sting. So you can't tell them apart. And so you can't tell what they really look like. So they can be arrogant and nasty all over the city and throw their weight around. And when they're out of disguise, you don't know that's the guy who was just nasty to you because he looks completely different. Okay, why would they do this? First of all, they have to have lots of excess magic at
Yeah.
their disposal if they can hold this stuff. Secondly, why are they doing it? It can't be for kicks. Well, it can be for kicks one night, but if they've been doing it for years, if it's an established family habit, there's something else going on here. Like perhaps they want to hide their true looks because they are the long lost royal family on the run and they don't want to have to leave town. So they habitually change it. And see, it's generating stories all by itself. So always ask yourself why. And then the last thing you have to ask yourself when you're designing for adventures is why now? If the dragon is sitting there on this pile of treasure that fills the room, why didn't someone come along 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 12 years ago, last week, and take all that treasure away? Why do your player characters get to be the lucky people on the spot now? So you have to come up with reasons why something wouldn't have happened.
Yep. And your world will feel a lot more real and tangible to the players if they know that stuff is happening despite their actions or lack of their actions. So, for example, in our setting, we have Ragnarok that's happening. And so it's too late to stop the apocalypse. But the apocalypse of Ragnarok unfolds over 4 ages. And the first age is Fimbulwinter, where the sun and moon are devoured by 2 celestial wolves, Skull and Hati, plunging the world into eternal night and eternal darkness. But not really so eternal. That's what the prophecy says. But there is a second, third, and fourth age. And the second age is an age of cataclysms. But there is a sun again. That is what the prophecy says. And so what we've written into the universe is we give the players an opportunity to reforge another sun and launch it into the firmament. Because, of course, they're the heroes, so they should get the spotlight on them. But if they choose not to do it, or they get distracted by some shiny little thing over there when they were doing the sun quest, and they go off and do that, well, it turns out there are other people that are on that agenda as well, and someone else is going to get that done. And so if they see that happening, that puts a little sense of urgency and makes the world feel alive because not everything revolves around them. Now all of a sudden they're like, okay, wait a minute. Yeah, we can't just dilly-dally and, the GM's going to just have everything on pause and
Yeah.
basically whatever we do, the world just reacts to us. We're on a timer here. We need to pay attention to what the GM's dropping in terms of nuggets of little lore and knowledge, and maybe we need to get somewhere before someone else because something else is going to happen the way we don't want it to unfold.
The pitfall of the early editions of D&D. Oh, we all have to go and get trained. Okay, no problem, because nothing will happen until we're finished training. And the moment the players think that, it doesn't mean make for worse, but it is immediately clear they don't think this place is alive by itself.
It's like a video game, right?
Yeah.
Until you've crossed that certain
Yeah.
checkpoint,
Yeah.
the rest of the dungeon doesn't load and other things
Yeah.
happen and whatnot.
Yeah. And then that means the world is just a stage for the player characters to strut around on, which is fine. It really is. But you want them to feel like things are happening. If they're in the bar blind drunk, or if they're lying there with their leg in a splint, just waiting to heal. The world is going to go on without them. Things are going to happen. And then that makes it more important for them to make choices. Do we do this? Because we're going to be on the shelf for 2 weeks. Can we afford to be on the shelf for 2 weeks? Or do you think this is when the king is going to say, hey, those pesky, annoying adventurers are down. Let's do it now. If that point has been reached, then you won. The world is alive. The world feels alive. Yes, it's all imaginary. Yes, it's all, we're sharing it in our heads, making it up as we go along. But we no longer have to work hard to do that because the world has a momentum of its own. It has enough of these elements that we were talking about, the cabals and the factions and the faiths and the nobles. Enough power groups are bouncing off each other that stories start to generate themselves. And that's the second thing. You do not, as the world builder, have to sit down and say, gee, what can I have happen to them now? Because you've already got all these things in play. It's logical that this is going to happen. That orc horde is coming. Or, you know, that thing that they fought last week? Well, somebody's going to want revenge. The setting is beginning to generate stories for you.
And that's the beauty of, a lot of hands went up when I first asked the question, are you guys building your own worlds? And I'm assuming this is the reason you're building it, is you want sandbox adventures for your players, right? You don't want to railroad them on an adventure that's already pre-written where someone's going from A to B to C to D. You want them to be able to say, hey, this is my world, go. What do you want to do in my world? And so the more of that you have already in play, if they feel those dynamics at work, then you can let them loose and they will bounce off like a pinball machine and have all of these things popping off in your world. And you'll have to do even less work because they're writing the adventure for themselves.
And they will feel better about it because as the heroes, they are acting upon the world rather than the world continually acting on them as if they're just handy punching bags. And they will feel better because they will say, let's go conquer that barony. That robber baron's been there long enough. And then they do it. And then they feel a sense of achievement because they decided to do something aside from draw their swords hastily as the orcs attack them, which is, satisfying if you kill the orcs, but it's still like,
It's always reaction.
yeah, it's always reaction. We can't even go to the supermarket to buy, new sour goat's milk without orcs attacking us. And you want it to be like, hey, we want to do this. Like, we want to upset that petty king, and maybe if we can, like, set somebody else who's a stooge of ours up to rule this city and get a connection between them and force all these people who are fractious, all the nobles, hey, nobles, you've been living off the high of the hog. It's time for you to build a road between those two things. A good road, a good wagon road. And then you have created something that wasn't in the setting before, and you can be darn proud of it. You're building your legacy. And when your player characters are doing that, and they then feel invested in the world, because look, that road wasn't there before. Nobody else ruled that and that together before us. Now you have something that you as a dungeon master can attack, and they can feel like it's threatened. Well, we've got to do something about that, because if that orc horde comes out, they're going to roll right through our kingdom, and they're invested in it because they've built it now. And again, the world is generating the stories for you.
And there's nothing cooler for players to find their stories, their events in your published materials afterwards. So if you look at like my core rulebook, Denizens of the North, Lords of the Ash, my players for my weekly games can flip through those books and go, yeah, we did that, and we did that, and we did that. So they've got their stamp on a bunch of stuff that is in that universe, and they feel there's no better feeling for them to go, yeah, this magical item, this ship is actually, they remember that adventure, that crazy adventure that they ended up having. Yeah, that's a huge plus for them, and it's a plus for you because they're creating that content again. We go back to that creation of content. Like one of them, when we were at Carnage, there was a funny side anecdote. There was a group that took me on the wildest sidetrack on one of my adventures ever. you know how you start an adventure with like a 2-minute intro flavor text, and then the rest of the 4 hours is the adventure. After the 2-minute flavor text, they said we're going back into the flavor text. That's the next 4 hours. So I said, you guys are on the ship. You guys get attacked by a kraken. The kraken damages the ship. The ship needs to make port. You can't make your regular destination. You guys are going to have to make port on eastern Iceland instead of western Iceland, where you guys needed to go. And as soon as they land, I'm like, okay, now what do you guys want to do? Like this is where the adventure starts. And I look at the players, and one of the players looks at the other ones, goes, "We don't run from kraken." And I was like, what? We're going back and killing it. I'm like, but that was flavor text. And I'm like, okay, discuss amongst yourselves. You want to write up some Kraken stats?
Which is why you world build, because you've got the Kraken and everything all ready, and you can say, sure, go any direction you want to go. The whole world is ready.
And their ships are in that book now, because what they ended up doing was they built a ship. They rebuilt their ship. They built a Kraken killer ship with like spikes and stuff. They went off looking for baby Kraken to test out their ships on. And they said, okay, if it works on the baby Kraken, then we're going after the mother Kraken. And then, so when they went after the mother Kraken, that ship was so tricked out for Kraken killing that I was like, okay, we ordered supper. It was around 6 p.m. And everyone had like aluminum foil with their suppers that were delivered. So I was creating like, tentacles, and the boxes were the ships. And I was like, this has gone completely off the rails. So like, okay, we got a decoy ship. We got the Kraken killer ship that's going to come in and spear our eyeball. And I'm like, this is so legendary. And so the next group was standing there going, like, what the hell is going on? They're ready for the next game that I'm going to run. And I'm like, don't worry, your game's nothing like this. And that's Ships and Denizens of the North. So, like, yeah, that's the beauty of having your players kind of help mold the world and to have those kind of crazy events kind of fit into that.
Yeah,
And
it also feels better because at the table they're doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
They
You
are
don't railroad them.
They are sorting for you whether they want to be murder hobos or whether they want a dungeon crawl, or whether they want to go around and talk to all the merchants in the city and establish diplomatic ties. They are picking what lights their fire at the gaming table, and you are benefiting by developing that over time with them.
Yeah.
So the world is getting richer and richer and deeper, and that's what we did with the city of Athleath, is to give you the bones for everything. So
Book 1 of 5.
yes, book 1 of 5, each city, blah, everything.
But this
So-
covers the entire city.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
one book covers the entire city.
Yeah, so that you don't have to make any, what I would call resource-based choices at the table. You don't have to say, well, I haven't detailed that entire district yet, so let's rush them past that.
Yeah.
We need to do that. No, everything's detailed, so you can literally let your players pick where they want to go and what they want to do. And then they feel like this world is real. It's not, oh, Charlie bought Tomb of Annihilation, so I guess I know where we're going. That will never happen, because Charlie's sitting there going, the world is yours.
The gates are before you. Go and explore the city. And that was our goal too, is to detail every single building, every single street, so you can focus on doing the funny voices, adding the character of who you're meeting, and you don't have to worry about what's behind that door or down that street. You can just focus on that scene, making that scene the best it can be, and then the setting material will take care of the rest. And then hopefully what you guys are working on in your projects, you guys will release something like that helps other GMs focus on that game session. And then the material you guys release now helps the GM go, oh yeah, that answers all of my questions for the justice system, the politics, what's behind that door, what's down that alleyway, what's behind that dungeon door. And that just makes everyone's life easier at the table and a richer experience for everybody. Do we want to take question and answer?
Yeah, I think we should now, because we can gab for
Yeah.
hours, but we might as well gab about what you want to hear more of.
So you said the whole city's in that book, and
Yep.
it's 1 of 4? 1 to 5?
Yeah, so it's going to be a box set. So there's going to be a rule book for the Runic game system. There's going to be a character generation book. There's going to be an adventure book. There's going to be a deep dive book for certain sections. But this is the overview book of the entire city. So every single building is detailed. So there's 300 locations in this
Yeah,
book.
yeah, 96 city blocks,
Yeah.
okay? And then a deep dive book that will probably be as big as that one, because we'll cover,
Riverfleet.
yeah, Riverfleet. So one docks block there, and then Taffy's block, and we just go down this right across the city. Everything there except the palace will be in the deep dive book. And this game that Andrew's designed has social combat in it. So that's another thing. If you're playing with your teacher, your church minister, your disapproving grandmother, and you do not wish to have a game in which people's eyeballs are being slashed out, people's entrails are being cut out of them and fed to them, and other nice fun things, you can just do an entire game where you are talking to people, trying to persuade them
Yeah,
the
because
three things.
I've been RPGing for like what 40 years, something like that. And one of the things that I've realized is when you hand someone a character sheet that only has combat abilities, it's like a nail and a hammer, right? It's like that's my only option. I can only go to combat, right? But if you hand someone a character sheet that's got combat abilities but also social abilities, crunchy social abilities where you can question someone to try and connive some information out of them, either through intimidation, seduction, trickery, and you can get that information from them. Then you can provoke them to emotional conditions like, guilt, remorse, love, friendship, not your typical paralysis and, the typical RPG conditions. And those conditions also affect physical and social combat. And then you've got a compel attack, which allows you to make someone do something through, dialogue that they wouldn't normally do, or convince attack. Then all of a sudden the players are like, oh, I can have a really crunchy encounter where I'm rolling dice, drawing runes, using my powers, but I don't need to kill someone. So it scratches that itch of, I've got, a really tense scene where I'm using my abilities, but I didn't have to kill anyone. And at the end of the session, it felt like you had combats throughout the session, but it was, non-violent combats. And you ended up creating alliances, creating enemies, leveraging favors. People now owe you favors, things like that. And that's what we wanted for an urban setting. So you're not
and to do
murder
that,
hobos.
you have to give enough detail to the characters and that's what the deep dive book will have, is a dirty secret for every single NPC.
And a characteristic and a proclivity.
But yeah,
3 things.
but
So
yeah,
every character, every denizen, every NPC in there is going to have social stats. So when you end up seeing like NPCs that have hit points, armor class, a weapon, well, how do you interact with that NPC? Probably violently, right? But if you've got an NPC that has a stat block that has personality traits, secrets that you can extract, favors you can get, well, all of a sudden your relationship with, that kind of interaction changes.
and you get two immediate benefits. The backstories that are revealed for these characters in their dirty secrets and so on immediately tell you what this NPC, what their outlook on life is and what they're heading for, what their aims are. And the other stuff we've given you in the proclivity and the characteristics, what they're interested in, do they have a hobby, and their characteristics. Do they have an annoying nasal voice? Do they have terminal acne? Whatever. Gives you a shorthand role playing as the game master right there at the table, and you no longer say it's innkeeper number 46 because you don't know what else to do. So it's, oh, can I?
They
Would
rub
you
their
like a
hands all
room?
the time.
Yeah, because that's innkeeper 46 and innkeeper 45, and instead of that, you actually have your role playing tips on how to run them at the table painlessly. Is that they've been presented as real people that we're just getting a little window on. Oh, I know how to run that real person now because I can see them right there. They're not a generic guard, they're this guard.
Yeah, and we preemptively released the social combat rules in Children of Ariu. So this is like our 2022 release of the Fate of the Norns Ragnarok system, and then it's going to appear again in the Aftermath box set. So all the social combat rules are already been in testing for a year, and they're getting polished, and it's going to be out again.
And
in
the
box
other
set.
thing I've been doing on Twitter, I've been tweeting meanwhile in Ask Cleas, meanwhile in Ask Cleas, and these are news and rumors. And by news, I mean real reports of real things that are happening, and rumors which may or may not be true. But it's the gossip that's going around the city, what people are talking about. So when you go to buy some bread on the way home, that's what there'll already be a customer in there, and he'll be talking to the proprietor. And the proprietor will probably be telling him, oh yes, I heard about that, but I heard they had tentacles, or whatever. And so that is building in what is being talked about in the city. It's piling in possible story ideas for you to, oh yeah, okay, tentacles. So there are people in this city who have tentacles coming out of their extremities. I'll use that. Or you'll go, no, tentacles? No, that's too low. That's not in my, so it's just a rumor. It's not true. And you are building these up. We will give you a book of them eventually, but that's the point. You don't need to. You just need to do that yourself all the time, and then the whole setting feels real. And you can you can play with this. You can parody it. You know, remember that comedian who says, "Oh, you doesn't have to call me Joss." You know, and it was the one-trick pony. But I mean, you can have the dwarf who says, "It's war." You know, the guy in the corner of the tavern, "It's always war." And of course, that's the thing. It always is to that guy.
Yep.
His solution for everything, oh, we're going to war. And you go, here we go again. Oh, let me tell you about the war. You know, and you go, oh, yeah. About the time you killed Asmodeus, great. You know, but that's the thing. You can put all these things in, and then the 346th time, the army will come through the gates, and you'll see that dwarf dying with 3 swords through him. He says, "I told you it was war."
But it's a really good way to be disciplined for your world building, is write a rumor a day about your world.
And make them small or large.
Yeah.
Some will be the armies marching. Some will be, oh, the dragon has awakened, and that's why the earthquake happened. The dragon's awakened, and we're all going to die eventually when it spreads its wings and gets the kinks out and comes for us. You know, because it has to eat now. And then the next rumor can be something like, hey, you know that crazy lady down the end there? She's invented this way of putting like really sweet things in those little buns we used to buy. Yeah. But Roggenwalder bought one of those buns and he broke his tooth on a key. There was a key baked into the bun. What's that? What's up with that? Key to where? Oh. Let's go talk to that lady and see if she has a supply of keys and how that happened. And then they go to talk to the lady, she's not there. There's a replacement behind her. What's up with that? You see?
Someone's looking for keys.
Yeah. And you see
Missing
now
key.
it's building a story just out of that.
Other questions?
Yeah. Ed, as inventor of Forgotten Realms, is there anything today that you can look back on that foundationally is kind of held true to what your original vision is, and then how maybe have you taken that experience and then applied it today into what you currently have developed? And because very clearly you went from a fantastical setting where you're actually setting some historical roots here in a very unique setting. What were some of those lessons perhaps learned that you've then been able to apply to this?
The big foundation one is the world is people, not geography, and concentrating on the characters. And that's what has to shine forth. And of course, I started in this case with writing the novel.
Yep.
So it's all about the characters. And the first line of the novel is, I am come to kill the king. Now, there are 2 young people, 2 teenagers,
Country bumpkins.
yeah, from various Hibernian clans out in the countryside. They've been sent to the city. One is male, one is female. They're from different clans. They don't know each other's mission, and they're quite suspicious of each other, but they happen to come on the same ship. Because, you know, the guy keeps looking at the girl because she's a good-looking girl. And the girl keeps looking at the guy and said, that guy keeps looking at me. What the hell? You know, I mean, but it isn't just I'm being looked at because of my looks, because she gets that from all the males, you know. But there's something about that guy, as in, he's my age. I can tell what clan he's from. The attorney. Why is he here? And of course, they're both sent to Athcliath. Their clans want to know why Citric is taxing so highly and where that money is going. And they want to find out anything their agent can find out about the aims, what Citric is trying to do, because they're awfully suspicious and awfully wary that, you know, this conquering Norse king is going to be expansionist time and going to plunge them into fresh war and so on and so forth. And they've already had it started raids because, being in the countryside, they have more food stockpiled, turnips and stuff. And now this hungry city wants it, and there are going to be people stealing and trying to resell it and so on. So they're already wary. And the second part of the brief was, and if what the king is up to is really bad, kill him. Because it doesn't matter if all you do is off one man. There's going to appear to turmoil, because these Norse, they're warriors. They came here and conquered. They're going to fight each other for supremacy, for who now warms the throne. And that'll buy us time. Well, they're all fighting each other, not us. So go ahead and do that if you can.
If you can.
If you
They've
can.
never been to a city this size.
Yeah.
And they don't even know what the king looks like.
Yeah, they don't know what he looks like. They've never been to a big city.
Yeah.
And you'd say, why would you send two idiots? Why wouldn't you send veteran warriors? Well, the answer is deniability. And cannon and fodder.
Sure.
Because they're totally expendable, and they're if they get captured and tortured and they're blabbing everything about their mission, first of all, the clan elders, if Citric sends a messenger to them and says, we found what you did, you're gonna pay. You know, they can say, what? We did what? You sent assassins. No. Why would we send assassins? And she told us everything. You know, before we tore her limb from limb, when we were taking all her finger and toenails out one by one, she told us everything. Everything what? You think we're stupid enough we'd send some teenager? You know, and it's, again, plausible deniability. And you get to see, as they explore the city, because they've never been in a big city before. Now, they've been told, people of their own clan who have shops and stuff in the city, if you need help, go and see, go to this shop and see this person. And they do that. And you get to, and they don't know these people other than by reputation and name. So you get to see along over their shoulders. So the novel has a secondary function of showing you the city, how people talk, what people looks like. The young male gets noticed by one of the wealthiest nobles in the city, the Lady Blacora O'Hara, and she walks the streets with a whole bunch of handsome male bodyguards, all dressed exactly alike, that literally form a teardrop around her so that she's protected from everything.
The Robert Palmer voice.
And she notices the young man, and he notices her, and he doesn't know how to behave, but he wants to ask her things, and of course the bodyguards, like in unison, go shh, like keep back. You know, they don't even have to say anything; it's just all in unison. And she goes, no, let the lad in. You know, so that you're getting to see how people behave, what it looks like, and then he comes back to the door of the inn and that he's staying in, and the innkeeper's been leaning in the doorway watching this whole thing, and he goes, aim high, you do. You know, and so you're getting how people think and behave, what their attitudes are in the city, and you can do that for yourself. You don't have to be a great fiction writer. You don't have any intentions to turn out a novel. You can just like jot in broken English point form. What if you go to the market and buy chicken? Who would talk to them? What would they say?
Short stories,
Yeah.
little blurbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That actually gets to my question. How do you organize all this? 'Cause I've been doing a room every day.
thinks it's organized.
Telling me with the specialty edition, Forster like Bridge Inn is in 1350 DR, and you just know that. But for the rest of us, how you're doing a rumor a day, how when you're going back or you're trying to develop this, or even just trying to keep it present during a game session, like how do you organize the information to make it easier to use?
Well, it's dead easy for you guys now with computers and the ability to sort and so on. You
Control F.
Yeah. You can, yeah.
Want to tell them about the storage
in my
containers?
day, because I'm old
I find
and
stuff
white
faster in a
hair.
printed book than in a PDF.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still like that.
I actually, because my father was a prof at a university, in those days when you wrote exams at university, the profs would hand out these identical booklets, and they're all numbered, and your name went on them, and then they had to collect all the unused booklets at the end of the exam, and they were supposed to shred them, throw them away. Well, my father had grown up through a depression and a world war. You didn't throw anything away. And my aunt who raised me, if we were wasteful, even scraping food off our plate instead of eating it right down to the plate is, oh no, if you waste, Mr. Hitler will win the war. And we'd think, oh, come on. No, she meant it. It had been drilled into her, you do not waste. Well, my father collected all the booklets. He brought them home because it was free paper. I did all my writing in the early realms in these little exam booklets. And I would have them as I was DMing. There'd be an exam booklet. So I gave myself like 3 seconds. Role play. He goes, what's your name? And he says, my name's Tazarkan, son of Tazarkan. And you write Tazarkan, son of innkeeper. So your players, 8 months of real time later, are going to go back to that inn and say, the innkeeper, remember? And you have to say Tazarkan, son of Tazarkan, because one of them made a note and they're waiting to catch you out in inconsistency. So you go, oh yeah, Tazarkan, son of, and they will complete that. That's Tazarkan for you. So, and that's what you do. And I was writing longhand during all our play sessions. Now, I don't expect you to do the same, but you do have to keep track of things and start at the beginning. The worst thing you can do is wait to the end. I love indexing. You may not love indexing. And if you shipping containers full of box 55 years, and go somewhere in there are the names of the 2 apprentices the minister had before. But damned if I'm spending the rest of my life looking for it. Keep on top of it as you're doing it. And it's very easy. You can actually, assuming you break this down into, say, 5 kingdoms, okay? Do you have 5 markers of different colors? You just put a block on the marker like you're doing a bingo thing. But this has something to do with this kingdom. If the note has 3 kingdoms on it, 3 different blocks, and then you know how to rough sort them into shoeboxes or archive beggars boxes, and then you just keep on top of things that way.
Great, thank you.
No problem. But yeah, do it from the beginning. Do not try and play catch up. You will end up playing catch up at some point. But if you never ever do it from the beginning, your catch up is going to take years out of your life that you do not want to spend.
So, you're not wearing a shirt with your name on it, so I don't remember your name.
Andrew.
What's that?
Andrew.
Andrew.
Sure.
The world is people, and then like the whole concept of Fate of the Norns is that the world is going through Ragnarok. So how do you take a world that is undergoing basically a prophecy, and pretty much dictates what's going to happen, and then create like a world around that where you have an opportunity to affect change?
So, prophecy is in the eye of the beholder. So there are certain divine races that are either exempt from the prophecy or don't even believe in the prophecy. So, for example, the Dvergar, the dwarves, they are the arms dealers of Ragnarok, and they don't believe. So the Norn are the ones that spin fate for gods, giants, and men, and they're the ones that say there will be 4 ages of Ragnarok. This is how the final battle will happen on the plains of Vigrid. Odin will be swallowed by Fenrir. All of that prophecy of the Völuspá from the Eddas. But the Dvergar are like, no, these ladies are Sauron's universe, which is they don't believe in it at all. They're saying that the Norns are spinning this web, and then gods like Odin, which are so fixated on changing the future, are falling into the trap of the Norns by fulfilling that prophecy. And so they're saying, you know what? We're going to arm both sides. They're going to kill each other, and we will come out as the dominant race at the end of all of this. The dwarven kingdoms rule the giants, the gods, everybody. Then you've got the Alfar, the Leos and Svart Alfar, and the Norns aren't able to weave them into the tapestry of fate. These are primordial beings from the very beginnings of time, from the crucible of life. So they sprung out at the same time Yggdrasil grew out of the crucible, and they cannot be spun into the weave of fate. And so they are kind of these X factors. So I leave it to my players to kind of lean one way or another in the universe, whether that fate is real or not. There are so many things in that prophecy that are unfolding as foretold, but there are X factors like the dwarves don't believe in it. The Alfar cannot be woven into it. That leaves the door open for the players to go, well, we're only in the first age. There are 3 more ages. These could completely derail and end in a completely different way. And so in the second age, we've got the Cataclysm. The third age is the War of Shadow. And the War of Shadow is where the elves have their War of Light and Darkness with Nidhogg. And Nidhogg is the world-devouring dragon. So if you've got Yggdrasil at the roots, the gods and the giants fought against Nidhogg and imprisoned him in Vergelmir. And he has been gnawing on the world tree for centuries, creating this tumor called Mirkvid. It's a forest that has grown into all of the realms. And so this great force of Nidhogg is going to manifest itself in the third age with the fury of the elves, which cannot be controlled by the Norns. And so I leave the door completely open to these prophecies can end up getting derailed in a wild way, because I've already set the stage that the Norns, if they go into Mirkvid, any divine race that goes into Mirkvid, they lose their immortal divine status. They can be killed forever in Mirkvid. So this is kind of where gods go to die. And so it puts the fear of God of all of the divine races going in there. And so when you've got a lot of these kind of intersecting story arcs of different attributes and motivations, even though you have a prophecy that might say, oh, I'm taking away the player agency, when you've got so many of these working against that prophecy or intersecting with that prophecy, the players are like, well, anything can happen at that point. Maybe that prophecy won't apply to us. Maybe it's just going to apply to the gods. Or if it does apply to us, maybe the Alfar are going to come and change things for us. You know, so if you leave those doors open into your universe, you can have prophecy and fate live alongside still player agency.
And
so
that-
it's about like finding those gaps.
That's
Yeah.
critical.
It's
to do
wedging
that.
those gaps. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the players
Yeah.
will find that despair of like, well, it's all scripted,
Yeah.
so what's the point?
Yeah, we're not heroes. We're actors playing a scripted role, and it can't turn out any other way, which is fatal at the gaming table.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you need that the prophecies either have to be totally cryptic, or they have to see that. And David and Lee Eddings did it with the child of light and the child of dark. This prophecy could be right, or that prophecy. There are competing prophecies. You have to do that. You're taking away that. And so prophecies may sound cool when you're just writing fantasy fiction, but they are death. It's the gaming table, free action.
Yeah, you got to leave the doors open.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when you're world building, you know, you've got all this magnificent stuff down on the paper. What do you think are some good ways to introduce your players to all of this world building you've been doing without just talking to them for 2 hours and just saying, oh, you see this wonderful thing and blah, 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 and this person you've actually been blah.
Oh, make a movie.
Right, yeah.
Buy them popcorn.
It is tough. It is tough to find that balance because you're excited about your world and you
Yeah.
want to share that with them. And so it's really a lot of self-control because otherwise, yeah, you could launch into a monologue of like, you come and see this about the creation myths or the apocalypse myths, and then the players are sitting there for 40 minutes as you kind of like
Right, they're all
talk to them. Yeah.
And
their Mountain Dew
You,
cans.
if you're doing fantasy fiction and you're professionally publishing it as opposed to self-publishing it, you will be saved from this because the editor will go, no, the lore dump that started on page 3 and ended on page 253 has to go. Just cut it all and get to the action. So, I mean, you have a secondary person stopping you from lore dumps. Now, there are critical, and which most Americans know from the Tom Swift books, and most older British readers know from Swiss Family Robinson. Father, how is it that our combined strengths can... Well, as you know, and then the essay, you have to find ways of working it into the story. Now, Roger Zelazny did it masterfully in Amber. First lines on the page is, I woke up. Here I was. Where the hell was I? He's waking up in Greenwood Mental Hospital. Thanks, Roger. Because he's been in an accident that was intended to kill him, and he has amnesia. So he's going to learn who he is as a member of the royal family of Amber and what that means. And you're going to learn over his shoulder alongside. That's one brilliant way to do it. Although it's rather drastic. You can only do it once.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want a world of shambling amnesiacs and you get to learn over his shoulder. That's a bit too much of a trick. But the other thing you can do is what I did in The One-Eyed King. You have the fish out of water. The two teenagers who are going to a big city. They've heard of the big city. It's like legendary, but they have no idea about what it really is until they're experiencing it. The smells, for one thing, are hitting them. The noise are hitting them. There's so many people, and there's wagons everywhere and moving. Oh, I can't think, because they're not used to that. And then you're learning about it along with them, gradually, because they can only handle so much. So they go to the inn, they ask the innkeeper, how do I get to that shop? So they are slowly doing, and you are
feed
looking,
the nuggets.
yeah.
And the mechanics can come in handy as well. So I don't know what systems you run, but for example, Fate of the Norns Ragnarok, we have lore arcana, lore personas, lore locales. And you draw runes, and for every success you get a nugget of information. So if someone gets 3 successes, I'll give them 3 nuggets about that person, place, or magical thing. So that way I can rein myself in, because sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I want to tell you all about that. But no, you only had 3 successes. So I'm like, okay, what 3 nuggets of information can I bestow upon you about that place or that person, right? So you can use the mechanics also to kind of constrain how much you give to your players as they go through your world.
And you can also have things happen in play that spur things in a logical manner. Like, you're walking on the road to get to the dungeon, and suddenly a splendid garbed rider with a heraldic badge of some sort on his tabard gallops past you, covering you with mud and shit from the horse's hooves. And you go, hey, I've lived here all my life. Have I ever seen that badge before? Well, funny you should say, you can indeed say, you've never seen this before. But the top half of it incorporated crown of thorns, and that you have seen before. It's so it is tied to the unfolding action. It doesn't feel like the lore dump or spoon feeding. It sounds like, oh, this is something my character would know, right? Like, I've lived in Lake Geneva all my life. I would know where I could get a banana shake, wouldn't I? Yes, you would, if you'd lived there all your life.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What's your guidance on, while building your own world, immersing yourself in someone else's world?
Guidance. Well, okay. The danger, the trap that everybody immediately thinks of is I'll start copying that world I'm immersed in. It'll be too close to me because that's what, no. But I would say, as a librarian and as a book collector and reader and as a music collector and reader and all that stuff, the more input you get that is eclectic and different, so you learn about soil mechanics and how the hillside slowly erodes and the soil migrates down it, so the farm fence that was like this ends up like that. Completely different from, so is there enough mercury in this thermometer that if I break the bulb off and stab him, I can kill him with mercury poisoning? You know, all the and you see in a library you get this all the time because you get asked these questions because you know there are in fact people on this continent who do not have the internet. They're called old people and they come into libraries and they ask us these same questions. So if you are constantly
Who
getting
asked you about mercury stabbing?
a lady who was writing her first mystery novel, and she thought this was going to be a real cool thing. She would have a rectal thermometer.
Her husband didn't disappear.
Well, and that's the thing. She figured, well, it's got 3 thermometers in the bathroom, so the cops will never suspect that there's a 4th one that's missing. And of course, no, they won't until the autopsy says, well, you know, he's got a broken rectal thermometer shoved up his ass. That could have had something to do with it. But anyway, the asking the questions of that, and if you work as library staff, you're helping people find the answers. These days, a lot of it on the internet, but in the old days, it was all books. So the more diverse things it's like, I don't want to watch any westerns because movies because I'm writing a western. Maybe I better not. Okay, then watch treacly romances, watch war movies, because there will be things that come in from all of them. Not that you're going to copy straight, like, you know, say hello to my little friend. You don't want to use that line because everybody will know where it came from. But things about that movie, you can pull and inform yourself with your descriptions about how people looked, people talked, how they walked. All this stuff goes into your world building. So become a sponge. Watch things. Things that are incredibly noisy, like a busy airport or a busy railway platform, or the front lobby of the lodge when everybody's arriving, that's probably too busy because you can't hear yourself think with all the conversations going back and forth. But when everybody's like 3 sheets to the wind in the evening and they're sitting around in the lobby and you can people watch, and those are all characters in your next adventure. Every single one of them. Mm-hmm. So you just pull, but the trick is to do diverse. If you do a single one, yes, you are in risk of copying what you're seeing, particularly if it's attractive to you. It's a well-told story. You're like, wow, this is the best movie I've ever seen. You start thinking, I gotta have this, I gotta have that. Oh, that's the formula for success. Oh, I loved it when this character said this, so I'll have a smart-ass character like that. You know, and then you are, by osmosis, starting copying. But if you're taking in from like 40 or 60 or 80 sources constantly, live life. You only get one. So spend your time being a voyeur and an eavesdropper. No, if you're pulling in things from everywhere, then everything you do is richer creatively because of that. Because your brain never shuts off, and therefore you can never sleep. So during your 2.5 hours that you gave yourself to sleep that night, but you can't sleep because your brain won't stop working, well, you might as well write in game design for those people.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll say the same thing. When I was coming up with the mechanics for the runes, I would immerse myself with all kinds of gaming. But what I was looking for was not in any RPG that was already out there. And what I was finding was in designer diaries from the board game industry. Because I was looking to solve, you know, I wanted actions to matter. It's not just like a rinse and repeat. Okay, it's my turn, roll to hit, roll for damage. I wanted damage and combat to feel visceral and meaningful, not just, I'm just doing math for the sake of doing math. Like, I've got 50 hit points, I took 13 damage. I just got, you know, I was trying to be immersed in combat, but now I'm just doing math. I wanted things to be multiple levels of crunch, so because when I sat around a table, everyone around the table had different tolerances for rules crunch and mathematics, and I said that's the real representation of gamers. It's not all min-maxers or all, you know, fluffy role players. And so I had like a checklist of things I wanted to do, but none of the RPGs out there were doing what I was looking for. And I was just reading all kinds of designer diaries, and it was the late 90s, and the Euro board game invasion was happening, and I was reading all of their board game designer diaries, and I was reading their approach, and it wasn't, let's take this dice mechanic, put a twist on it, and release a game. It was, let's look at the player dynamics around the table, and what are the healthy player dynamics? Do we want low player downtime? Do we want player elimination? if a player is ahead, do we want a catch-up mechanic or a slowdown mechanic? Like, what are the player dynamics and interactions that we want as a healthy ecosystem around the table? And then after they've decided what their mission statement was, then they sat down and wrote the mechanics for the game. And I was like, that's brilliant. And that's why, like, the runic game system is so different than everything else out there in the RPG space, because I got influeed by some other places that were not in the RPG space at all to solve the problems that I was looking for. And so it's the same thing could be said for world building and everything else. Is broaden what you're looking at and the solutions and the ideas will come.
And let me share a secret mechanic from TSR, the Game Wizards, back when they were preparing for 3rd edition, that is tied to that. They wanted to review the entire realms, and they would say, what is this, and why is it here? So what is this would be Aglaron, or Thay, or Mahorn. What is this? Define it. Can you define it clearly in a couple sentences so you can send me a mind picture of what it is? Oh, it's this huge kingdom full of wizards. They're all red wizards because they wear red robes. And they're assholes and they're slavers and they're mercantile powerhouse and there's a huge mountain in the middle of Thay and they're ruled by an undead guy. Okay? Why is it here? How are you going to use it? And you can do that when you're world building. You're building out from your central point and you're now at the here be monsters edge of the map. You go, oh, I have to have a land for the stone giants. Yeah. And oh, I have to have a troll kingdom because I'm playing D&D and the trolls have to have a kingdom and I haven't got one, so I'll shove it on the borders because I don't really want a troll kingdom. So they, you then go, okay, what is this? Why is it here? It's here so the trolls have a place to call their own. Okay, yeah, but okay, what is it? If we see trolls everywhere else and you're fighting them, what's so hellish back at the troll kingdom? They've all left. They're all wandering around. You see, because it then helps you in your world building. So what is this and why is it here? See, we're full of world building because we just do it.
So can you kill someone with mercury poisoning if you stab them with a thermometer?
Yes, you can, over a great long period of time.
So it'd take a lot of thermometers.
Yeah, it'd take one big ass thermometer. And your commercially available thermometers, no,
Have mercury.
no, they don't have mercury.
They're all alcohol these
They're
days.
all alcohol these days, yeah. Now, can you give them alcohol poisoning? Yes, but if you're stabbing people with broken off thermometers, they're gonna notice. It might be easier to just push them in front of an oncoming car.
It depends on the size of the thermometer.
Yes,
If you
it
get a
does.
big one, you could kill them outright, and then the alcohol doesn't even matter.
That's a point. Now, we need a factory that could make big ass thermometers longer than this table.
Glass lens.
Why would they make them? See, again, it's
For people with big asses.
Like giants.
yeah, like giants. Okay, yeah. You see, there's the thing. It generates more ideas and more things you want to think about for your setting, and why it should be there. And that circles back to, remember I said, and why now?
Right.
Why is it your player characters right now? What has been in play to stop somebody taking Smaug's treasure before you get there? And that again ties back into world design.
When you're world building, how often do you find yourself going all over the place, back and forth between like 12 different things you're building, or do you find yourself just like focusing on one thing until it's kind of done?
Oh, you jump all over.
On every call.
Yeah, you jump all over.
On every call.
Because even if you
We'll have an agenda.
Yeah.
But we'll be all over the place.
Yeah, even if you intend to zero in on one thing, and yes, there are times when you have to intensively zero in on one thing. The old TSR days. Hey Ed, we just sent you a piece of art. It should have popped up in your email by now. I'm on rural dial-up. I can see the top half inch of it. Okay, we'll keep talking. But when you can see that entire piece of art, we need an adventure to go with that. We need it by tomorrow noon. Okay? So there will be times when you have to intensively focus on one thing just to get it done. And there will also be what I call the keystone thing. You have to decide this one thing before you can finalize these 42 other things. because they all tie into that. If you have a world that is high magic, it will be very different from a low magic world. If you have a world, Kryn, that is deficient in some metals and they're very rare, and that's why you've got steel pens and so on, because it affects the entire world. There are wider ramifications. So there are some things you have to do first, or high on the agenda, high on the docket, before you can get to the other fun stuff that's lower down, because the fun stuff lower down depends on that first thing. And there's also times when you have to concentrate on one thing. When you do, your accursed brain, all the tentacles whirling around in your brain and coming out your ears and frightening the doctor, will be sending you madly off in all directions at once.
But what about the Fae in the basement?
We weren't going to talk about the Fae in my basement, but that's the thing. You will end up jumping all over the place. All you need to do, and in the old days, pre-phones and computers and internet and all that stuff, my father, who was a writer, used to say, you might catch a writer naked in the bath, but that naked in the bath writer would still have a pad of paper and a writing implement within reach, because that's what being a writer was and is. You have to have means of capturing those weird ideas as they come flooding out of your brain and just write them down, because that's the worst thing. We had a conversation on the way down of elements that had to be in a particular building in that city and why they needed to be there. Well, because of the circumstances, I couldn't jot them all down at the time. So the third one, what the fuck was the third one? We got the others, but because I didn't capture it at that time. So yes, you will jump all over the place, and that's fine. That's how your human brains work, by doing weird, crazy things off to the side. They jump all over the place. Leave aside all that modern babble-blab about multitasking. Just say your brain will go all over the place. This is your brain on speed. Everybody's brain is on speed.
Yeah.
The people whose brains are actually on speed, they are focused. Or totally unfocused. One of the two. Everybody else is in the middle, jumping all over the place. So that's good, and it will happen, and don't worry about it. Just write everything down.
Yeah, and if you have to hit some sort of main points, have an agenda. If you have co-creators and whatnot, at the end of this meeting, no matter what else we talk about, we have to iron out these 3 points or whatever it is.
We cannot hang up until we know who the royal heir is.
Yeah.
So you can talk about pizza, and you can talk about the latest movie, and you can talk about your cat spoils, but we need to get to who the royal heir is before we hang up tonight.
Yeah.
So, if you're world building, you're coming up to a point where you have to figure out the thing you've been dreading. For me, it's economy. How do you get yourself to the point where you feel like you can finally tackle it and actually want to tackle it?
Well, whether you want to or not, it has to be done, right? So there's certain things that, it's just when you run a company, when you create a world, when, you're in this business, it's like there's going to be stuff that's just not fun, right? And editing, like there's certain layout, some of these things are not as sexy as, coming up with what in the basement. But that has to be done, right? Because the players are going to question. They're going to be, how does the economy work, in the city? How does, if there are no sewers, how do they get the shit, right? We had to have that discussion because water, there are no sewer pipes. So, certain things like that had to be figured out.
And there are wells everywhere that people have been drinking from.
Yeah.
So the poo couldn't just have been
Very, exactly, yeah. So things like if you're asking about economy, if you're not into economy and things just, your eyes glaze over every time you look at, Keynesian economics versus, some other types of economic books.
Guns versus butter.
Yeah,
Oh,
then,
boy.
maybe you find YouTube channels by some animated, interesting people talking about different economic models of, medieval ages versus modern, and you just start jotting ideas down. And maybe you're going to interpolate something completely new and unique and different that works in your universe that doesn't have to be, a carbon copy of what's boring and exists in our world, right?
But in practical terms, unless the economy, remember I was talking earlier about the Keystone thing that has to be decided before you can get anywhere else. If that isn't any economy, how it all works, usually isn't, then do everything else, and it will have established goalposts for your economy, because you already know that this king is arming, so he's going to need weapons, so he's going to need metal. Where do they get the metal for? Yeah, is there a set of mines in the center of the city? I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's going to be somewhere else. They're importing metals from somewhere. Whom are they importing them from? And what are they paying those people with? Do they have extra food or lumber or whatever? And so the goalposts for what you need to put in your economy, you've already built by avoiding the economy and talking about everything else in your world. You're establishing the goalposts. Sometimes it's where you need to do something to wrap something up. It is so much easier to have somebody else establish the goalposts. Like I said earlier in the piece of art they sent me. Or, yeah, but this has to be the Elven Kingdom, Ed. So please don't give us another gnome playground. I need an Elven Kingdom. So your goalposts are being set for you, and you just fill in the gap with you. Because it's easier. Because now you know, okay, in my economy, they need to import metal. They need to pay for that with something. And you can actually, when you're going hopscotching across your fantasy map with all these made-up kingdoms, what do they import? What do they export? Why? What do they import? What do they export? Why? And you can see the evolution of game design, because if you look at the original Greyhawk release, because it was coming out of Chainmail and it was coming out of Sandtable Wargaming, it can tell you exactly what troops the Pomage can field in terms of little minis that you're going to put on a table. There's nothing in there about imports or exports out of the Pomage or anywhere else, because he didn't care. That wasn't the focus of that fantasy campaign. You found out their populations, you had their heraldry, because he had to paint all those little banners with his minis so you could tell them apart. But there's nothing about imports and exports. So, and there's nothing at all about the economy. Now, we put something in Acquiesce, which is an artificial attention on the economy, in that the king is taxing at 100%. Why? And where is that money going? Everybody who has to pay those taxes sure wants to know, because they're pissed. Because this beer, this tankard of beer, I need you to work with me here. Use your imagination. Okay, this tankard of beer that they just bought in the tavern, which they were going to be charged 3 scat for, because it's the crab. Cost them 6 scat, because the king needs 3 scat. Why do we put up with this? What has the king ever done for us? And you see, and things flow from that. So yeah, if the economy is the thing you hate, do everything else, and it will start. You can actually write down a point form list of, we have to have metal going imported. We have to have, because I've already said that. So if I wrote my novel first, said in this, I've already said this in the novel, this in the novel, this. I guess we're stuck with those things.
Those are the goalposts.
Yeah, those are the goalposts. And then you do it from there. And you can actually, you can do what I used to call the stupid student method. Now everyone will see that question 3 on your test is to discuss how the West was opened and what the financial and economic impacts were on the 13 original colonies of the West being opened. Discuss and explain. You have 5 minutes to turn over your papers now. And the stupid student could say, the effects of opening the West on the original 13 colonies, you're barfing back the question to the prof and then beginning to enter. That's a good way to begin if you don't know anywhere else. And remember, now that we're in the era of pixels, you can throw all that crap out when you get to the end and get into the meaty bits and are answering the question. But you're restating the question to yourself to get yourself to start thinking and filling in the gaps one by one. And you can actually, and I've seen library ladies I work with do this, they will write a huge, long, baffle-glad answer to something. Like, how can our marketing position our library in a way that we are more closely bonded to the community and they see our value in it? They just start writing shit.
But those are the goalposts.
Yeah, and then they go through and read what they've written, and they highlight words and phrases here and here, and nothing else, because the rest of it doesn't matter. The bits they've highlighted, oh, that was a good one. That was a good one. And then they just throw away all this baffle-glad and take the bits they've highlighted and say, okay, there's the nugget of my answer. Now I got to turn this into English that makes sense to somebody else but me. And then I've got my answer, and I've done. And that's the other thing. If you're world building in the long term, yes, you can go exhaustive, but there are certain things you want to be bare bones because it will grow and change as play unfolds, or as you write more novels. Like if we tell you everything about Menzo brands and the Drow and so on beforehand, then where's the fun in reading the novels? Because you're watching it unfold in front of your eyes as you're reading the novels. You're watching one house wipe out another, and what the accepted custom in the city is for what happens when one house swallows another. That's being portrayed in front of your eyes. Well, if that's being portrayed in an adventure of Fafnir's Treasure, or at the gaming table, then that becomes your goalposts, and that's what and it's a lot more fun to have it play out in front of your eyes, and then it matches your world, not some artificial thing you just came up with. Because wouldn't it be cool if gravity was repealed and everything flew upwards? And, well, the ramifications will...
You have to think about all that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Plant seeds, not trees.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Because I've only slash and burn trees.
So perfect. I think we are at time.
We are at time because we can talk. Shutting us up is a problem.
Yep.
Talking is not.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's do it again. GM Masterclass tomorrow.
Yeah, same time, same place.
Same bat channel.
Sorry. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Just gotta skedaddle through here.
Oh my god.
Hi folks, Ivan with Many Realms here. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I know that the internet has been a little bit of a problem here. You got to remember we're at a con, so there's hundreds and if not thousands of people probably hooked up to the internet all right now. So I apologize, but this stream will live on the YouTube channel later, and you can always find it there and, you know, get a little bit better of a visual than what you got with just the audio. Also, I just want you to know that that book on Athleath is going to be available probably within the next month or two, and that's available on fateofthenorns.com. You can also find Fate of the Norns on Twitter. If you go to Ed Greenwood's Twitter, at the Edverse, you can also find links to Fate of the Norns and stuff there. He writes a lot about it. And it's also going to be coming out in a 5-book box set, that Athleath overview. There's going to be a ton more of this Fate of the Norns content coming out, so definitely keep an eyeball on it. That's all I got for you, though. There will be other streams like this that happen throughout the rest of the convention. They're all a little impromptu because our schedule is quite hectic. But I will say that hopefully that you're enjoying them, and I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now. So you're good, sorry.